Yo, I have a 2013 Suburban. Well, actually it's a GMC Yukon XL in here. Same difference. This is an LS engine. Pretty much all the LS engines in all the trucks and Suburbans are about the same in Chevrolet. Anywhere from a 4.8, 5.3, 5.7, 6.0, 6.2, and a 7.0, I think, are pretty much all the same. This has the infamous oil pan leak. It's leaking really well up there. The oil filter, the filter pressure runs through the oil pan and it leaks on the corner all the time. It's really common on LS engines. So I'm going to do an oil pan to this. There's the part number. I'm going to use a Fel Pro oil pan gasket. That's usually where the leak is, right here. I also got an O-ring for the pickup tube because once in a while I got to drop the oil pan because this O-ring, it gets hard and sometimes it cracks and it doesn't seal right and it sucks in air with the oil. And once in a while when you cold start it, it'll produce low oil pressure and it'll have a low oil pressure problem on your display. There's the part number I got for this. First thing I'm going to do is get the oil out of here. Looks like I got a 15 millimeter on this drain plug. Sometimes these are 13s. Get this oil filter off of here. I'll let that drain out for a good long while. Longer the better. I actually let this truck sit for a good day or two too, so all of the oil runs down to the bottom of the pan so it's a little less messy. You do this on a hot engine that has just been run and it drips forever. Most of these trucks have an aluminum skid plate under here. This one doesn't have one. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm going to get this skid plate off. 15 millimeters. I have to deal with this axle. The dealer tells you that it needs to be removed. I've never had to take one of these completely out yet. There's some wiring on this thing though that's attached to the axle, and I want to get those little attachment points taken off in a couple of spots so I don't pull on this wire. I have a cross member under here I need to remove. These are 18 millimeter. Nice long bolts and nuts. There's 4 of these. A little bit stuck, a little pry bar action. It should come right out. Looks like on this model I got a big fat sway bar in my way. Almost all of these trucks don't have a sway bar here, so you probably don't need to deal with this. I got 15 millimeter sway bar links here. A lot of times you gotta replace these. They break all the time. I'm gonna try to save them. See if I can get these off without breaking them. Just gonna take a bolt in the washer and the bushing off and leave the rest on here. I don't need to take all of that off. Looks like I have 4 10 millimeter bolts on the sway bar bushings. Try to take this out. No problem. Now I'm going to get on with this axle. I have the axle supported. I have a screw jack under it. There's 2 bolts on this side and there's 2 bolts on this side to drop this axle down. I got a swivel ratchet up here with a 15 millimeter on the top. You can barely get at it. Some people take off the drive shaft. I try to take off as little as possible on these things. So I'm going to remove all 4 of these bolts. 18 on the bottom and a 15 on the top. This one here, I got a breaker bar on a short socket. I got that little 3/8 breaker bar up there. Hopefully I can get this one off without a fuss. Then on this side I have two 21 millimeters. And I can just jack this down. And it should just come out of the way enough for me to get that oil pan off, I hope. Depending on the years of these trucks, the steering linkages can be a little different. Some of them, the older ones, don't even have rack and pinions. This one looks like this line's going to be in my way. So I'm going to unbolt the rack and pinion and try to drop this down too so I have a little more room. I have two 24 millimeters here. The top one is extremely tight. There's an 18 millimeter in this hole for the other side. I'm not going to take this bolt all the way out. I'm just going to loosen it to try to drop this side down, and hopefully I'll have enough room. There's another 18 millimeter up top here. So I left this bolt in and I took the other three out. There's one way up here too. And I think that's going to drop it down enough for me to get the pan out. I got about 2.5 inches here to deal with. There's a wire loom on the front of this oil pan that's got to come off. There's a 10 millimeter on the side right here. Then I can just pull this over and drop it down. There's a wire loom and a transmission line on the passenger side of the vehicle with a 10 millimeter on it. That should be kind of out of the way. I see they did a little bit of different stuff with this newer model. A lot of the older trucks have oil level sensor that you need to unplug right here, and it looks like they put the NOx sensors on the bottom of the block down here. They're not up under the intake anymore, which is kind of cool in a way maybe. There are some little dust shields on both sides on the rear of the oil pan. This one's right under the starter. There's a 10 millimeter on this. Some of these dust shields can be a little different from year to year. Looks like on this one I'm going to have to take a couple 13 millimeters on the starter and just loosen them up. I don't think I need to take them all the way out. I got it pulled back enough. I think I can get away with that. I don't want to have to take this damn starter out. I'd have to disconnect the battery to do it. And I think that's not going to be in my way. That should be just enough. On the driver's side, there's a 10 millimeter right next to the oil filter. That one actually comes off. Now on the back of the bell housing, there's two 15 millimeters that are bolted into the oil pan. This one has a bracket on it for the transmission line. All the rest of the bolts on this oil pan are 10 millimeters. There's a whole bunch of them all the way around the pan. I have an air ratchet and a 10 millimeter swivel socket with a long extension, and I'm just going to try to take all of these off. The back ones are really long, and all the rest of them are the same length. Well, it looks like I got them all. I got a dead blow hammer. I'm just going to hit on this pan a couple of times. Loosen it up. Oh geez, I don't know if I'm gonna get this thing out without a fuss. It's looking like a no. That axle's still in my way. Well, can't blame me for not trying. Now it's time to remove this axle. These drive shaft bolts are 7/16 or 11 millimeter. Something is still actually standard on this truck. Get in here with a pry bar and pop this U-joint out of the way. I'll probably bungee cord it out of the way a little bit. I'm going to unplug this four-wheel drive actuator. Just pull back on this blue tab and pop this off. That one broke. I already got the other ones disconnected. That bracket for the driver's side, I'm going to unbolt at the axle. These are 18 millimeters. I suppose I could have just left that bolted up to the frame. All these bolts for the half shafts are 15 millimeters. I can just hit this with a hammer. Should loosen it right up. Now for the passenger side, of course I have it supported now. Carefully remove stuff. Jesus, everything's stuck to everything all of a sudden. Okay, that came out. I can thank gravity for that one. This oil pan can come right out now. There's a vent for this axle that I forgot to mention that you should unplug. But gravity took care of that one real nice. I think I'm going to bolt that bracket back up before I put this axle back in. This oil pan gasket's riveted in. A lot of times you can just pop the things out by wiggling it around and prying on it. There's only two of them. They can be drilled too, but the head's popped off, so I'm just going to leave them. There's a windage tray in here I can take off so I can clean this pan out. These are 10 millimeters. That way I can get all the sludge out of here that's been in here for the last X amount of miles. It's not too bad. It's mostly coking. I don't feel any metal shavings down in here, really. I don't see any either, which is a good thing. I'm going to deal with this pickup tube next. There's a 10 millimeter up here. And there are two more 13 millimeters. I don't think it's going to make a mess. Just wiggle it around and it should come off the front. This O-ring actually appears to be in really nice shape. Carefully take it out. It's stuck up in the block. There's my O-ring. I put the new O-ring on the pickup tube when I put a little silicone paste on it, just so it slides up there really nice. I'm just going to start these nuts so it doesn't fall. And I can start this 10 millimeter bolt. Now it's fairly critical to torque this bolt. You don't want to over torque it. Too much is not a good thing. For right now I'm just going to snug it down. It's not really tight at all. I'm going to tighten these first just to square it up. And these get tightened to 18 foot-pounds. I'm going to final torque this one to 106 inch-pounds. It's about 9 foot-pounds. I got everything cleaned up. Same thing here, 106 inch-pounds. I already took a razor blade and I cleaned this surface off really good. Now I can just put a little brake cleaner on a rag and just wipe this off. Make sure there's no oil left on here. You want to make sure nothing fell in these holes for the oil filter. I see a little piece of something in there. I'm just going to get in here with a Q-tip and just swab it really quick. Now for my gasket, I'm just going to lay it on here and make sure it sits here really nice. Yeah, that rivet is not even in the right place. So I just busted the heads off and they're wrong. So instead of drilling these out and making a big mess, I can just pound them in. And now they're pounded in flush. I could leave them like that if I really want to, though I can get in here with a punch and just pound them all the way through. Looks like everything's going to line up fine enough. So instead of riveting this thing down, some people do nothing. I'm going to use some high tack. Old school. This stuff works really nice. I'm going to keep it off of the oil galleys for the oil filter. I need to put it on both surfaces. So I need to make sure that this is the oil pan side, which it is. I don't need a lot of this either. A little bit goes a long ways. Now I can just take and stick this on here. Now that'll be stuck on there real good for the remainder of the remainder. I scraped the pan rail on the block really good. And yeah, I let this drain for like 3 days so it's not really messy. Now I'm just going to hit this with brake cleaner too and make sure it's all clean. I already did it once, but I'm going to do it again because I got to make sure that nothing in these corners have any oil in them. They need to be completely dry. Well, I got some ultra gray. You can use ultra black, Permatex. And I'm going to hit these 4 corners right here. And if this gasket sealant doesn't stick, it's because there's oil on it. And you don't want that. It's got to be perfectly dry. If it's not going to stick and it's not going to seal. Just need a little 1/8 inch bead on here. And you got about 10 minutes to work with that before it starts getting tacky and setting up. I don't really need to, but I can put some on these 4 corners too, where these little waffle looking spots are, just because. Well, this is going to be a lot easier to sneak up here without that axle in my way. I'm going to put this pan up and I'm just going to start a few of these bolts. Well, I don't want to get these tight, I just want to snug them up just a little bit. It's kind of a good idea to start in the center and work your way out too. I'm going to put these 15mm bolts in now. I can just start these. I don't want to get these tight either. I just want to kind of zero these as well, just to make sure that the oil pan's butted up against the bell housing, which it already is. I got these zeroed. I'm going to just back them off just a little bit, just so they're barely touching. Then I can final torque all of these little 10mm bolts down to 106 inch-pounds. I'm just going to start in the center and work my way out. I'm going to kind of give them a 0 for now. Squish this gasket up. I got all these zeroed really good. Now I'm going to do the final 106 inch-pounds. I got them all. Now I can final torque these to 37 foot-pounds. Might as well check my oil plug too, that's tight. I can put these covers back on, get this starter back up here. 37 foot-pounds on the starter bolts too. These cover bolts are 106 inch-pounds too, if you actually care about such a thing. I'm just going to screw them on, they're not that big of a deal. Really kind of wondering if I needed to even unbolt this rack and pinion now, or whatever. I would say these big bolts get torqued to about 140 foot-pounds. These little ones here, these should be about 75 foot-pounds. Well, I don't have a handy helper, and I'm not a no-neck bench pressing weightlifter, so I got my transmission jacked it up there as best as I could, and I just took a couple of straps and strapped both sides to make sure it doesn't fall off the tranny jack, because it's really super awkward. And I just got a bolt started, and now I'm just gonna get this car back off the ground and bolt it up the rest of the way. I'm pretty sure all of the mounting bolts for this whole axle are all 75 foot-pounds. I'm just going to use my screw jack now and try to get these two bolts lined up on this side, because I already put that bracket up here. So I lined up that one with my little pointy bar. All of these bolts on these axles get torqued to about 41 foot-pounds. I'm going to say 41. That sounds like a good number for that. Just got to make sure those clips are on the inside of the joint. These get torqued to about 15 to 18 foot-pounds. The tapered side goes towards the front. I'm going to do about 75 foot-pounds on these too. I would say tighten these to about 18 foot-pounds. These here I would do about 30 foot-pounds. They pretty much just bottom out. I wouldn't tighten these down to any more than probably 15 foot-pounds. Before I put this filter on, I'm going to want to fill it up with as much oil as I possibly can, because it's going to help prime the system, because it's going to run dry for a split second or two unless I fill this thing up with oil. I'm just going to leave it sit. It'll go down and I'll add a little more until it's all the way full. This bottle is only 5 quarts. It might take 6.5 or 7 quarts to totally fill this thing because I took the pan off. It says it's a 1/2 quart low, but as soon as I start it and I get all the oil in the system, it should go down another quart maybe. I'm gonna start this thing up, see if it rattles and knocks, make sure I didn't blow it up, make sure the oil pump works. Says it's got 60 pounds of oil pressure. It's at least 1.5 quarts low. So I'll add an extra 1.5 quarts and check it. Well, actually, I'll add 1 quart and check it and go from there and call it a job. Okay, bye.